Hey everyone, this is Dr. Jenkins. This is the review video for the muscles, Biology 230, A&P 1. So what I have here are all of the models that we've been looking at in class, okay? Arms, legs, torso, muscle man, abdominal plaques. I'm going to review the muscles as we talked about them in class. So we first talked about the abdominal muscles. We can see some of them on the muscle man. Remember, the abdominal muscles we can identify by direction of fiber and layer. So the abdominal muscle that runs in the middle of the abdomen with the fibers running vertically is the rectus abdominis. The muscle on the side, on the outermost layer with the fibers going down and in lecture and lab, I was talking about hands in your pocket. So imagine putting your hands in your pocket and your fingers are approximating the direction of fibers of the external oblique. So external oblique on the side, outermost layer, fibers go down and in. Those are the only two that we can see on this muscle man. But you're going to want to have a look at the other plaques. So here, we can see the rectus abdominis. Its fibers run vertically in the middle. Here we can see the external oblique. Its fibers go down and in, outermost layer. Have a look at this muscle plaque. We can also see rectus abdominis. In the middle, fibers running vertically. On this one, on this side, they're showing you the external oblique. How can I tell? Because the fibers are going down and in. On this side, they're showing us the internal oblique. The external oblique, outermost layer, and the external oblique, the fibers go down and in. Underneath the external oblique is the internal oblique, and its fibers go perpendicular. So outermost layer, external oblique, fibers go down and in, like hands in my pocket. Next layer is the internal oblique. Its fibers run opposite to the external oblique. The deepest layer, of course, is the transverse abdominis. This muscle plaque shows the transverse abdominis, deepest, and its fibers run horizontal. We can also have a look at the chest muscles. Now, we can't see everything on these models, so you're going to want to look at the pictures I have posted online. So some of the deep muscles we cannot see. We cannot see on these models the external intercostals. Actually, we can. Scratch that. We can't see the rhomboids. We can't see the erector spinae. So some like that. So just make sure you're looking at your whole list. I'm reviewing what I can ask you on the models. So we did the abdominal muscles. Let's now look up at the chest, the ones that we can see. So of course, no one's gonna miss pectoralis major. We can see that. No one's gonna miss pectoralis major. We can see that. You're not gonna write pec, that would be wrong. Pectoralis major. These abdominal plaques show you pectoralis major. And then on this side, they've peeled back the pectoralis major to show the pectoralis minor. Remember, we talked about the serratus anterior. That's the muscle up by your armpit. Boxers have really well developed serratus anteriors. We can see serratus anterior on the muscle man. Serratus anterior are these higher ones. Be careful, the serratus anterior are higher, closer to the armpit. They weave in with the lower abdominal external oblique, but just make sure you know the difference. External oblique is lower, serratus anterior is higher in the armpit. We can see, actually, some of the deeper muscles also on the torso model. So when you're in the labs, you're going to want to have a look at Plastic Charlie. What can we see with Plastic Charlie? We can see some of the other muscles. Well, first, we can see this is actually part of the pectoralis minor. We can see serratus anterior. Beautiful. The respiratory muscles, the diaphragm. So this whole thing on this side, and it comes up on this side like a hood. I could ask you on this side or this side, diaphragm. We can see some of the intercostals. So when you look up close in lab, of course, intercostal tells us it's between the ribs. The external intercostal has fibers that go down and in, just like we talked about with the external oblique. Up here, the external intercostal also goes down and in. So you'll be able to see these fibers going down and in, external intercostal. A little further down, they've peeled back the external intercostal, and I can see the internal intercostal. Whereas the external intercostal, the fibers go down and in, the internal intercostal fibers go up. We can also see on this one some of the neck muscles, okay? So, to make this easier to see on the video, probably easier if I just move Plastic Charlie. So, make sure we remember the sternocleidomastoid. On the torso model, both of these are the sternocleidomastoid. Now, when we look deeper, so both of these, sternocleidomastoid. When we look deeper, I look so funny holding this torso model. We have one that's lower. Now be careful, because we're not talking about this. This is the trapezius. We're talking about deep muscles of the neck that lie between the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid. The lower one, deep in the side, is the the higher one. The higher one is the levator scapulae. The lower one is the scalenes. So get your bearings. Is it this big one in the front? Sternocleidomastoid. Is it the big one in the back? Trapezius. Is it deep in the middle? If it's deep in the middle, the one here is the levator scapulae, higher, and lower one is the scalenes. Higher levator scapulae, lower scalenes. That's going to be your tip, okay? All right. If I pull out the muscle man, we can, of course, see the sternocleidomastoid. Remember, the sternocleidomastoid is when you turn to the side, do you see one muscle pop up in your neck? Sternocleidomastoid. Okay, next we went through the muscles of the leg. So let's do legs. For the thigh and the glutes, you're going to make this muscle model your friend. We talked about gluteus maximus, but nobody should miss that. Underneath the gluteus maximus, if we pull out the gluteus maximus, superficial one, gluteus maximus, the one underneath it, gluteus medius. There's other muscles here you don't need to know, gluteus medius. We can see the gluteus maximus and medius on our torso model. Nice and easy, folks. Gluteus maximus, and then on this side, they've peeled back the gluteus maximus to show the gluteus medius. Good. For the leg, I suggested we break it down by region. So we have the anterior thigh, right? I can tell by the foot, anterior thigh. If it's anterior thigh, you're going to think quadriceps. So then we know, what's the middle quadricep muscle? Rectus femoris. What's the lateral quadricep muscle? Vastus lateralis. How can I tell it's lateral? Look at the foot. So the quad muscle in the middle, rectus abdominis. Lateral quad muscle, vastus lateralis. Medial quad muscle, vastus medialis. The vastus medialis has that teardrop, medial. Underneath the rectus femoris is the vastus intermedius. It does look a little more tendinous, but there is a muscle belly down there. So underneath the rectus femoris is the vastus medialis. Also on the anterior thigh, we can see that thin muscle that wraps over top called the sartorius. Sartorius. And then lastly, up here on the top, lateral side, is the tensor fascia lata. So above the quads, on the lateral side, tensor fascia lata. This reminds me of the muscle of where I might put my hands on my hips. Tensor fascia lata, small muscle belly, long tendon on the outside. Okay, that was anterior thigh. Now we switch to posterior thigh. The posterior thigh, of course, is your hamstrings, your lateral hamstring muscle. How can I tell it's lateral? Look at the foot. Outside of the foot, lateral hamstring muscle, biceps femoris. The medial hamstring muscles are the semis, and there's two of them. The one that's on top is the semitendinosus. I think about T for top. The one underneath it is the semimembranosus. These run together, but the one on top is the semitendinosus. And then the one underneath it is the semimembranosus. So the hamstrings are composed of those three. So that was posterior thigh. Now let's do medial thigh, groin, medial thigh. The highest medial thigh muscle is the pectineus. It's not even labeled on here, pectineus. Be careful because we want to make sure we remember the front, anterior. These blood vessels, arteries, nerves, and veins, serve as a separating point. From here over anterior thigh, I'm thinking quads. But from this part of the blood vessels to the inside, I'm thinking groin. So if we're in the groin, the highest one near the PP, pectineus. Next one down, adductors. So we're in the groin, highest one near the PP, pectineus. Next one down, adductors. Lastly, there's a muscle on the inside that runs straight up and down called the gracilis. I think of this like a pant seam. Runs straight up and down inside of your thigh, gracilis. Cool. Now we get to the lower leg. These are not so bad, folks. The muscle right beside the tibia, tibialis anterior. By the tibia on the anterior side, tibialis anterior. The one beside that is called the extensor digitorum. It's called the extensor digitorum because it comes down and its tendons go to the digits. It actually extends the toes. Extensor digitorum. You're going to remember it because the tibialis anterior is right next to the tibia, tibialis anterior. Lateral to that, extensor digitorum. That's the front of the leg. Now we go to the back of the leg. You're not going to say calf. You're going to say the specific muscles, which are gastrocnemius. Both of these heads make up the muscle that you think of as the calf, gastrocnemius. Underneath the gastrocnemius is the soleus. It runs underneath the whole way. So I could ask you on the side, if it's underneath the gastroc, or on these models, we can also take out a head of the gastroc. So underneath the gastrocnemius is the soleus. Lastly, we have a lateral lower leg muscle. So you can also organize yourself by front, back, anterior, posterior, and lateral. Anterior part of the foot, tibialis anterior, extensor digitorum. Posterior part of the foot, gastrocnemius, underneath it, soleus. What about the lateral foot? Running right down the lateral side is a muscle called the peroneals. Be careful, because it kind of you can confuse it easily with the anterior muscles, but just try and stick to that. Anterior, tibialis anterior, extensor digitorum. Posterior, gastrocnemius soleus. if it's the soleus is underneath here. If it's a muscle that runs straight down the side, peroneals. Okay? You can see a lot of these also on the muscle man. Okay, so I'm going to let you review those on the muscle man, but same explanation. Lastly, arms. So, for your viewing pleasure, we have an arm model and the shoulder with rotator cuff. So let's do shoulder and arm first. Nobody should miss deltoid. Come on, you touch the shoulder, you're touching the deltoid. Let's look at the deep muscles. Underneath the deltoid, this is not coming off right now. The muscles that line the scapula, what are they called? Rotator cuff. Let's identify the 4 rotator cuff muscles. SITS, S-I-T-S. Supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, subscapularis. They're deep. We're underneath the pectorals, pectoralis major and minor. The rotator cuff muscle that's on the anterior part of the scapula, subscapularis. The rotator cuff muscle that's on the top, supraspinatus. So now we're on the posterior side. On the anterior side, same as the palm, on the anterior side, subscapularis. Now I'm flipping over to the posterior, back of the hand. The rotator cuff muscle on top, supraspinatus. Now we're on the back, infraspinatus, teres minor. Infraspinatus, teres minor. Okay, we can all, wait a minute. Let me correct that. Let me be more specific, my bad. Supraspinatus, infraspinatus, this little tiny one is the teres minor. Sorry about that. Supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor. There's another muscle, not part of the rotator cuff, called the teres major. Okay, so be careful. The rotator cuff, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor is that small one. The one that looks like it's part of it, but it's not, is the teres major. We can see these same muscles on the shoulder. I really like this one. Anterior, subscapularis. Posterior side, supraspinatus. Infraspinatus, teres minor. And then there's that one that's added, not part of the rotator cuff, but you need to know, teres major. Supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor. One that's also added, teres major. Nobody should miss biceps brachii. I do want you to pay attention with this because once you spend some time with this, if you don't, it can be easy to confuse it. I encourage you to pick up the arm. I know that this is the front of the arm, that's the back, so it's kind of like my left arm. When I do that, I can more easily see the biceps brachii. It is very cylindrical, biceps brachii. Underneath the biceps brachii, on both sides, is a muscle called the brachialis. Biceps brachii, brachialis. Biceps brachii, brachialis. You can also see if I take it off, brachialis. On the back of the thigh, triceps. It technically has 3 heads, triceps brachii. We see 2 of them here, a little third one here. But all you need to know is triceps brachii. Last thing for you to know are the forearm muscles. Before I do that, I don't want to forget the 2 big back muscles that no one should miss. Trapezius, upper back muscle. Latissimus dorsi, lower back muscle. Trapezius, upper back muscle forms the V. Latissimus dorsi, lower back muscle. All right, let's do the forearm muscles. On the anterior side, palm side, we have the flexors. So your first thing to memorize is palm side, flexors. Not palm side, extensors. Back of hand, extensors. Front of hand, palm side, flexors. You're just gonna have to memorize these and you can do it. Let me start you with the one that's in the middle. So I already told you that the palm side has the flexors. The not palm side has the extensors. But then there's one that's kind of in the middle, right up from the thumb. So if we find the thumb and come right up from the thumb, that's the brachioradialis. So I'm encouraging you to organize it in your head. The muscle that's right up from the thumb, brachioradialis. Now let's go to flexors. You're going to have to memorize them in order, okay? The highest one, right here, pronator teres, okay? Pronator teres. What's the next one down? Flexor carpi. Which side are we on? Thumb, radii. Flexor carpi radialis. Break it down. Once I know what side I'm on, remember the palm side flexors. The highest one is the pronator teres. Next one down, flexor carpi radialis. Why? Same side as the thumb. The one in the middle on the flexor side is the palmaris longus. The one farthest over, flexor carpi ulnaris. Flexor, and I'm on the palm side, carpi ulnaris, same side as the pinky. So, palm side, flexors. Then you're going to memorize the highest one, pronator teres. Flexor carpi radialis, thumb side. Palmaris longus in the middle. Flexor carpi radialis, ulnaris, flexor carpi ulnaris, thumb side. All right? Now let's go to the back. On the posterior side, we have the extensors, okay? And it's a similar way of remembering it. If I want to look here, extensor carpi, actually both of these, extensor carpi radialis. Both of these, extensor, actually wait a minute. Where's my mind? The one that's right in the middle is the brachioradialis, see? When I'm not sure, I just go back to my framework. The one in the middle, by the thumb, brachioradialis, so I eliminate that. The one in the middle, by the thumb, brachioradialis, so I eliminate that. Now we're on the extensors. This first one, extensor carpi radialis. In the middle, extensor digitorum. So we're on the extensor side, back of the palm. We have extensor carpi radialis, extensor digitorum, and what's the one over here? Extensor carpi ulnaris. Extensor carpi ulnaris, extensor digitorum, extensor carpi radialis. You can do it, just got to study. All right, good luck, folks.